The subject of tonight's video is not fair game. Welcome to Urban Legends. In 1981, a group of friends who called themselves the Arcade Pirates Anonymous, or APAs for short, were devastated when their local arcade center was closed for 2 weeks. A reason was not given for this, and it was the same in all the surrounding suburbs of Portland, Oregon. What came after, however, was an experience that far surpassed a mere video game. It was a long 2 weeks for the group, who consisted of Billy, Ray, Justin, and Stan, as they usually spent every available minute in the arcade. But sure enough, after a fortnight, they got the call. The building was reopened, and the APA were ready for business. They did not waste any time, and cycled there as quick as possible. The most popular game in the whole arcade was brand new and unheard of, up until now. It was called Polybius and made by a company called Cineslotion. It was so popular in fact that players could have only one turn each. When that turn was over, they had to go to the back of a queue to try again. Each of the arcade pirates played on Polybius, and were immediately hooked. The gameplay, graphics and sound were way ahead of their time, and very different to anything they'd played before. At school the next day, all anybody talked about was Polybius. Even people who usually didn't like video games seemed to enjoy it. As soon as school was over, the APA were straight back to the arcade center and joined the queue. This time, Ray, who was the best player in the group, advanced to level 2, but at 9 p.m. sharp, a group of men dressed in identical black suits walked in and talked quietly to the evening shift supervisor. She then nervously announced that it was closing time to all the customers. Ray tried to finish his turn, though the men insisted that he left. There was something very strange about these people. They moved and talked in a robotic way, and each of them carried a briefcase that made a humming sound. During school the next day, Billy, who was the quietest in the group, began to see things. They came as flashes, but it was as if he was seeing spaceships in his classroom, and huge explosions which followed. Stan, who was the most confident in the group, tried to concentrate, but he kept seeing words and letters move around in his textbook, which made him feel nauseous. He went to the medical room, but they didn't believe what he said. Instead, they determined that he had a migraine, and sent him home early. Justin, who was a math wizard, kept seeing strange corridors and neon lights that seemed to come from nowhere, and Ray was terrified when a face of a girl he was talking to began to morph into an alien head. Sadly, the arcade pirates were not the only ones who were seeing things. The whole town in fact was starting to lose their minds, driven mad by surreal hallucinations, but instead of quitting, the queue for Polybius was only getting longer. The Arcade Pirates Anonymous met in the treehouse in Justin's garden, which doubled as headquarters for the group. They discussed exactly what they'd seen and what others said they'd seen. They linked it all back to the Polybius machine. Stan had spoken to his grandmother, who was German, and she said that the word Sinneslauschen, which was the company name of Polybius, could be loosely translated to mean sensory deprivation. Everything bad that was happening was coming from that game. The boys knew that the men in black suits were part of it, and it was going to end tonight. The plan was simple. There was a small window that looked into the arcade building near the Polybius game. Ray was going to use his video recorder to record the men tampering with the machine. The group would then mass-produce the videotape and send it, along with a written account of what had happened, to every major tabloid in North America. All they had to do was not get caught. The next morning, the arcade pirates went straight to their local shop and saw the headlines in the newspaper. There was full coverage and still images of the agent men too. After that, they headed to the arcade. They were not surprised to see that Polybius was gone. They'd won and the gang spent all morning on the other machines. It was a Saturday after all, and what better way to celebrate their victory? It wasn't every day that you saved your town from mayhem. As they left, they each made a promise to never speak to anyone about the Polybius machine. They certainly didn't want the men in black to know they had anything to do with the sabotage of the game, as all the parcels had been sent anonymously to the tabloids, so unless anybody blabbed, they would be safe. They made a second promise to always remain friends, and as the years went by, each one of them made good on that promise. Polybius is a well-known urban legend, especially in the gaming community. Although popular, there are no official records of it ever existing. The likelihood is that the legend was born from two different events, both in the Oregon area, where Polybius was rumored to be. In the early 80s, 12-year-old Brian Morrow had terrible stomach cramps while playing Asteroids for 28 hours straight, and on the same day in the same place, Michael Lopez, who was 14, developed a bad migraine and was sick outside the building after playing an established game rumored to have graphics like that in Polybius. The law were thought to place wires and small cameras in gambling machines, hoping to hear confessions of any criminal that might play them, which, if true, would explain the tampering, although none of this was ever proved. If you are in the Portland area though, and you see a high score with the name Arcade Pirates Anonymous, then rest assured, they're watching, just in case anything strange begins to happen. That concludes tonight's story. I'll see you next time for more urban legends.